Welcome. Today we're going to discuss one of the biggest scandals the parliament has ever witnessed, which is the Qatargate. But was it really that unexpected? To get a better understanding, with me today is Patricia Chagnon. Thank you so much for making time.
Thank you so much for discussing this very important issue, which has been sort of overseen over the past almost year and a half now.
Yeah, because you actually wrote a book about it. Why is this issue so important?
Well, I was really surprised when the scandal broke out in December 2022 that everybody was so surprised. Because actually, I wasn't surprised at all. I wasn't surprised at all because for many years I have been studying what's going on with regards to influences of the Qatar Emirates or its foundations and associations within France and within the EU. And when I heard all my colleagues saying, oh my gosh, what's happened in the EU Parliament? I was saying, hey guys, but this was actually written black on white in a document which was published in 2000. And when I sort of realized that people weren't aware of that and weren't able to put what happened in the EU Parliament in perspective with regards of other big issues that happen influenced by money coming from the Qatar through the through the family, through the reigning family, or its foundations, or NGOs sponsored by Qatari, petrol and gas or dollars. I decided to write the book to once and for all set the record straight.
Yeah, because I got so excited to talk about a book, but I think it's important to maybe also explain a little bit, what is the Qatargate about? What happened?
Okay, what happened in 2022 in the parliament is that there were socialist members of parliament, previous deputies, peoples of influence, assistants, were actually found with suitcases full of cash in their homes. So they were picked up. They were picked up by, the Belgian police. Of course, my political group, we immediately asked for an internal investigation. And since then, you can sort of see that the machine has sort of come to a grinding halt and everybody is trying to brush this under the carpet. We've had Belgian judges working on the case who resigned or changed jobs. And basically, since it all happened in 2022, really nothing much has advanced in the prosecution or the clarification of the responsibilities. Now, why am I saying this is so important? Is because in the meantime, the EU and the Parliament are passing legislation that has been in favor of Qatar. I can cite two examples. There was a visa waiver that was voted for the Qatari residents. And I remember standing up and saying, why a visa waiver for Qatari residents? Money doesn't buy all. There is other ways of facilitating people to come into the EU or to France. And there was a second important piece of legislation, which was about opening EU airspace to Qatar. So on the one hand, you have an emirate with 3 million inhabitants, tiny little airspace, but a big hub to go to Asia, lots of money to be made when you do the line from the EU to Qatar and then to the Asia market, which is where you make your money. And Europe, which is 350 million people traveling to Asia, but with the Europeans not allowed to pick up any new passengers in Qatar. So I thought that was very bizarre at the time. And when I heard this, I'm sort of going, okay, well, how are these deputies or people of influence that have been accused of corruption with the money found, have they had any influence on legislative text being proposed in the EU? Have they had any influence on the votes? Who were the people who thought of visa waivers or opening airspace? How did this all come up? And I think it's really important to clarify that because it's very different from other, rumors that go on where people have no influence at all. But these people were actually, we were talking about the vice president of the EU Parliament who is accused and supposedly guilty of dealings with Qatar and of corruption. But then another element raised my suspicion because in my book, I go back to the year 2000, where in the capital of Doha, capital of Qatar, a charter was signed by 54 Muslim countries. This charter was presented by ESCO, which is like the Muslim world equivalent to UNESCO. It's like a copy, but for the Muslim world. And they signed a charter in 2000 to shift the objective of their actions not towards populations in need in the Muslim world, but to Muslim populations in the Western world and in Europe. And they said this was really important. And it's 120 pages, which I analyze in my book, to keep the link of the Muslim diaspora with the original Muslim countries.
Yeah, because if I understand it right, what you're saying now basically is, okay, Qatargate, when it first came out, all the reports were mostly focused on the fact that it's a huge corruption scandal. Elected members of parliament are bribed to...
Supposed to be bribed. Not
allegedly bribed, which is kind of interesting because they should bear in the interest of the European citizens, not of Qatar, not of themselves.
Of course.
But this is interesting because this is a perspective I haven't heard anywhere before, is that you're saying that we should put it in a wider perspective, that is namely of this charter that was written in the year 2000.
Yes, it was signed in the year 2000. It took them a long time to elaborate this charter. It has many, getting 54 countries to agree on an international strategy, is a major feat. So this was not just written in 6 months. I published in my book the entire charter, and my English translation will be published soon, but it exists. You will publish the link, I suppose, in your video. It exists on the internet, freely available in English. You can read it all. I'm not inventing anything. It's not something that's hidden. It's something that's actually been openly assumed by 54 countries, Muslim countries, as a strategy to implement not only Islam, but radical Islam in the EU. And that is what's so scary about it, because when you see in these past years, I've been in the parliament now for 5 years. I was there 3 years as chief of staff to a French MEP, and then I became an MEP in 2022. But I witnessed, for example, the presentation of the immigration pact by Ylva Johansson. From the very beginning, from the very beginning in 2020, September 2020, when she presented it, to when it was voted last mini plenary in Brussels. So what is my conclusion about this is that when you start putting that in perspective with the very pragmatic, structured, financed, thought through strategy, with actually an action plan written down, which mentions EU institutions, you sort of go, okay, and can anybody really guarantee me that those immigration policies that are being rejected by the majority of the European people, that are being pushed down their throats through the immigration pact that was just adopted, not by us, but by the majority in the parliament, has this not been influenced by money coming from foreign powers and maybe from directly or indirectly from Qatar? And I find that a very worrying subject that I'm very concerned that no one has deemed it necessary to put an investigation to it. I'm saying, all right, on the one hand, you've got the corruption side or the alleged corruption side, Belgian police to decide, Belgian judges to do it. They're doing their job. It's a little bit slow, but I can understand. But on the other hand, you have the influence on EU legislation that is affecting all the member states of the EU, that's affecting all the citizens in the EU. And we have no guarantee that this has been done without influence of a foreign power in the EU Parliament. And I think that's particularly worrying.
Yeah, because it makes one think that what is happening now is such a huge influence on the rest of Europe. Mm-hmm. It's going to affect everyone's life. Mm-hmm. Things seem pretty obvious the way you're presenting it now, the evidence, 1 + 1 is 2. Mm-hmm. First of all, why is no one talking about this? And secondly, why is there no further investigation between the link of this allegedly bribe scandal and the charter that's being presented as part of a bigger agenda?
Well, I think anybody that reads the charter from beginning to end, it's 120 pages. It's not that much to do it. But I've made it easy for the people who don't want to read the 120 pages in taking out the phrases in a resume and just saying, look, this is what's been written on that and that page. Go and look at it. I'm not saying it. I'm not saying this is what I suppose. I'm just literally citing their own document. Please ask for answers. Please ask for transparency on EU legislation that we are applying today, because I am personally not convinced that it is free from foreign influence.
Because I think a lot of people also would say, okay, but maybe we want transparency. Do you think if we would go to the Commission or the Parliament, we would get that transparency on a topic? Or are they trying to hide something?
Well, my political group, ID, we asked, the French delegation asked for an internal investigation. I think it was January after the scandal. So that was January 2023. Whatever the date, got to look it up, the precise date, that was refused. MEPs voted against it. So, we are only as big as we are. We cannot ask for transparency ourselves. And, I cite in my book examples of how this money, Qatari money, through their foundations, has influenced and bought mosques and constructed radical Islamic mosques in France. Also of right-wing municipalities. I cite former President Sarkozy in my book, who gave advantages for Qatari residents to be exempted from fortune tax if they decide to establish themselves in France, of tax benefits in that they didn't have to pay any taxes on financial gains of what's the word in English? Transactions on real estate. So this legislation, I had always been, of course, surprised and saying, why are we doing this? I can understand that a country wants foreign investment, but why these exaggerated advantages? Why? So when you read this, the pieces sort of all fall in place, and you sort of go, hey, wait a minute. Okay, Qatargate in the EU Parliament concerned essentially left-wing politicians. But in France, I give examples of right-wing politicians having been in charge when legislation was passed, which was obviously, according to me, in a disproportionate advantage of Qatar. So, money can have terribly far-reaching effects on people on politicians who are not patriotic. A journalist asked me, after my book came out, so yes, Mrs. Chagnon, and what tells me that you are not corrupt? And I said, you know what? I'm actually not a professional politician in the sense that I'm not a career politician. I am there to defend what I believe is our vision for France and our vision for Europe. So you can come with whole, truckloads of money. That's not why I'm here. I'm not here to make a living. I'm not here to that's not why I'm here. But I can understand and see that there are politicians who have a different agenda. And those, of course, are the weak chains in the whole system, and that can be possibly bought by money.
But as an EU citizen, that's a terrifying thought. Let's be honest. Okay, so we have members of parliament that are elected. They're not serving our interests. They're serving a broader agenda. They're being allegedly bribed. There is this whole agenda to completely, fundamentally change the identity of Europe. I think people at home want to know, what is our future going to look like? What is going to be the next step? Is there hope for change, or are we now doomed that this agenda will be pushed on us?
I would not be sitting here with you in the EU Parliament in Strasbourg if I believed that we were doomed. I do not believe we are doomed. I believe the French people are very strong people. I believe the European people are very strong people. I believe the European nation states are very proud, very strong people when the push comes to the shove. What I think is that we really need to vote those people out. And I'm not saying, again, that they're corrupt. This is up to our courts of justice in our respective member states to judge. By the way, not to some kind of subcommittee in the EU to rule that we're going to investigate or not. Let's put it in the hands of proper judges in our member states. But I am saying that this opacity, this smokescreen that has enshrouded Qatargate is not healthy. EU citizens deserve transparency on the people that make the decisions for them in their name, in their by their elected representatives, and they deserve explanation when things like this happen. So, but it's up to the European citizens. That's what your voting ballot is for. I mean, if you agree with what's going on, well, you vote for them again. But I'm saying if you don't agree, vote them out. Put other people in place. But the thing in politics is that elected politicians are accountable to the people. You don't like me, you don't vote me in. You like me, you ask me to stay. That's how it works in politics. That's called democracy. People should realize is that they need to make democracy function. If they think that they're not clear about this, well, they need to ask explanations. And if they do not get their explanations, like in this case, they should not be giving new mandates to these same people.
I think that's a very clear message that people need to go to the ballot, use the opportunity that we have to vote, because this is really our way to make a statement. Referring back to your book, you wrote a whole book about Qatargate. Mm-hmm. What is the most important message that you want to give to your reader with this book?
What I wanted to do is to say to everybody, you cannot say that you did not know. It was written down. Take your responsibility. Look at the facts. Don't believe the stories you hear. Look at the hard facts. These are the hard facts in my book that I've written down about what and how Qatar has been influencing directly or indirectly with money or with other things, policies in France, radical Islam in France. Are you convinced after reading this, where there are the hard facts, that what's going on is normal? Are you convinced that our interests are being correctly represented by our governments? Do you believe that the EU is actually taking into consideration these very serious allegations of corruption and trying to see if it hasn't influenced legislation for your member state, on notably the Immigration Pact? Well, if you're not, don't accept it. And the message is, there is no use in saying around the dinner table at your house or with your friends or when you run into people in the supermarkets or when you have demonstrations in your countries because you don't agree with something. No, the only day that you have real power, I mean, they love you to go and demonstrate. Oh, demonstrate all you like. You know, that's not going to change anything. The real change, the power of change is in your ballot paper, is the day you go and cast your vote. And people need to realize that. So the aim of my book is just to say, hey, don't come to me and say that I haven't done my job as a politician. I'm trying to tell you and give you the facts. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just telling you these are the facts. And think about it and take your responsibility as a European citizen of our great continent, of our great nation state. Take your responsibility and stand up and defend us.
So you informed the French audience, and how can we ensure that our English audience that don't speak French can read the English version? When is it going to be published?
I'm working on it, but I need to change the sources because I've sourced it very French about, influences in French, Islamic cultural centers and etc. So today is our last day in Strasbourg. So I will be campaigning now and having time to finish it. So already you can find a charter. You can find the charter on internet in English, and I will give you the link so you can publish that. So the charter is there. But I hope that first week of June, the day after the elections, second week of June, the day after the elections in France, my book will be available in English, and it will be available for free, of course, on internet, like this one is accessible for free on internet, and it will be available in print, and I will surely let you know.
Thank you so much, and thank you for this wonderful interview.
Thank you, Scarlett, for your interest. Thank you.